Hi everyone, my name is Kashif Khan. I'm going to be introducing you to a tool that I developed during my master's program, which deals with sentiment analysis of user reviews for different Airbnb listings. So I'm going to be going into the details of what sentiment analysis is for those who aren't too familiar. But essentially, this tool analyzes the reviews left on Airbnb listings and then assigns a rating to the property based purely on the comments. So it also extracts the features of the property that the users found good and those features of the property that the users did not find so good. So I'm going to be going into more details and displaying those results later on. So here is an example of something similar to what I wanted to do, but this is for Amazon. So essentially I pulled up a random desk product on Amazon and then I scrolled down a little bit, and here you can see that this little section that says read reviews that mention, and then it has a bunch of different tags. So essentially what it's doing is just going through all the different comments people left on that product and extracting things that it found are pretty key. So for example, you can think of it as like summarizing what the users commented. So for example, you can see that holes did not line. People said it looks great. People said easy to putting it together. Parts are not labeled. So basically you can see there's a couple of complaints and a couple of things people found really good, and it essentially just summarizes maybe sometimes thousands of reviews to a couple key little tags that give you an idea of overall what the sentiments about the product are. So these are the goals of my tool. So the first goal is to assign an overall sentiment score to the property reflecting the overall sentiments that the customers had towards that listing after living there. And the second goal is to extract commonly referenced features and their adjectives mentioned in a positive context and a negative context. So by features, I mean which aspects of the property. These could be anything like the bathroom, the bed, the host. And by extracting their adjectives, I mean which context were those features described in. For example, if the bed was dirty, that's a negative context, and the adjective would be negative. So now we can look at this example of an Airbnb review that someone might have left on a Airbnb listing after they went and stayed there. So I'll read it out for you. So it says, "We had a great weekend in Chicago when staying at David's apartment. The bed was really comfortable and the price was very reasonable for an apartment in Chicago. The bathroom was a little dirty, but apart from that, the experience was great." So looking at this Airbnb review, my tool would have two primary goals. The first goal would be to determine whether this overall comment is positive or negative, and then give it a score which basically reflects the positivity or negativity. The second goal would be to go into more detail in the comment and extract which aspects of the stay did this person have a good experience with and which aspects of the stay did they not have a good experience with. So now we can get into discussing how my tool actually accomplishes the goals that I mentioned previously. And it does so by first tagging each word in the review with what kind of word it is. So we have things like nouns, words can be adjectives, adverbs, and for our purposes here, the most important words to tag were the nouns and the adjectives that appeared before the nouns. After tagging each word in the review, my program would have a set of predefined word type patterns that it would look for. And these patterns would be things like an adjective followed by a noun, or a noun followed by an adjective. And anytime it encountered that kind of pattern inside the review, it would extract whichever noun and adjective pairing it found, and then assign that a sentiment score. So, for example, in this Airbnb review here, we can see how my tool would identify the adjective-noun pairings and then classify them as positive or negative. We have a noun phrase like great weekend, where the noun is the weekend and the adjective is great. We have something like bed was really comfortable, and it identifies bed as the noun and comfortable as the primary adjective. And then something like bathroom was a little dirty. It would identify bathroom as the noun and dirty as the adjective. After it identifies all of these different pairings, it would give them a sentiment score, which uses a sentiment analysis library in Python. And so we would get a score, and that score would tell us if it's a positive phrase or a negative phrase. And then at the end, it would basically summarize all of that and then assign each review an overall sentiment score. And while going through each of the different reviews for a listing, I keep track of each specific noun that appears and how many times it comes up in a positive sense and how many times it comes up in a negative sense. And then I can show at the end a resulting bar graph of the most popular nouns in a positive sense and the most popular nouns in a negative sense. So users get an idea of what aspects most reviewers liked and which aspects most reviewers did not like. And then I can also show a more detailed list of which adjectives in general came up with those nouns. Now here you can see an example of what to expect after running the program on all the reviews for a particular listing. On the left you can see we have a bar graph which shows you the most frequently referenced features in a positive sense. And on the right we have a word cloud which just uses the same information and just converts it to a word cloud. And we would produce one bar graph for the nouns referenced in a positive sense and one for all the words referenced in a negative sense. So you can get an idea of all the good aspects of a listing and all the bad aspects of a listing. The source code itself just consists of these different files and folders. Analyzer.py is the main Python program that you'll run through the command line. The requirements.txt file is something that you need to run to download all the different dependencies for the main program. Then you can ignore the miscellaneous folder. The data folder is where you put all the input files which contain the reviews of the different listings you're interested in. And the results folder is generated upon the program execution and it just holds all the different results that you wanted to generate. So once you navigate over to the repository itself, you can see I've given a lot of different information and we can go over to the installation. So to run this program, essentially you can run it on Windows 10, you can run it on Mac OS, and you can run it on Linux. And Python 3.6 is all you need basically to run this program. For the installation itself, all you need to do is essentially copy this source code onto your personal machine and then navigate over to the folder that gets created. And before running the program, we need to install the libraries required, like I mentioned before. So essentially you just run this pip install our requirements.txt file and all the libraries that you need will get downloaded to your machine and you're ready to run the program. So to run the program itself, you can run it with something like this. I'll go over all the different arguments. So you would just run Python analyzer.py, which is the name of the main Python program. You would give a source file argument, an output type argument, and a listing ID restrictions argument. The source file is just the location of the input file, which has, it needs to be a CSV file and it needs to contain at least 2 columns with the exact names, listing ID, and comments. This is an example of the kind of input file required by this program. So here you can see the different listing IDs, or in this case, it's just a bunch of different comments for one specific listing. And it has a lot of different columns, but the only ones that you need are listing ID, and you need to have a column called comments. And each of these different comments corresponds to the listing ID shown here. Next, we have the output type argument, which indicates what kind of output the user desires. So these are just a bunch of different permutations of the results. And to see the exact output files themselves, we can scroll up here. And as you can see, one type of output file is the bar graphs that I've already shown you before. The next is the word clouds that we've also seen before. And another type of output is the CSV file, which, as I mentioned before, just has a count of each time a noun was mentioned in a positive sense or a negative sense. And then it just has a bunch of different adjectives that were associated with that noun. And the last type of result was a listings ranked CSV file, which is just if you have different listings within your input file, then it just ranks them based on their overall sentiment score. So the most positively reviewed listing is at the top, and the least positively reviewed listings would be near the bottom. So one key thing to note here is that the bar graphs, the nouns and adjectives CSV file, and the word clouds, you would always generate 2 of them. So one would be specifically for positive instances, and one would specifically be for negative instances. Lastly, the listing ID restrictions is an optional argument, which, as I mentioned, there could be a bunch of different listing IDs you want to analyze at the same time. So this is if you only want to analyze a specific number of listings or specific listings themselves. You just enter this here, and then it would just filter based on that and only give you results for those listings. So here you can see examples of runtime arguments. So we just want to run the main program here. Our reviews are located in the data folder in the reviews chicago.csv. We want to get 5, so that's all of the different kinds of results, and only for these specific listings. Another example is this one right here, where the data is located in the same place, and you only want the listings ranked CSV file. You don't want like the specific features of the property, and since you don't give the last argument, you want to do that for all listings. And that was my presentation. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you can see the benefits and advantages of using technology and sentiment analysis in general for a variety of different purposes. Once again, thank you for your time.